Well, hello there. Welcome to the INRIS Files. Thoughts on culture, history, and the human condition from a Generation X point of view. We're live streaming. We are live streaming again. I am live streaming again. This is an experiment, and I am expecting to turn this into an interesting podcast. At least I hope it will be interesting. Otherwise, it'll be short lived. But I have been, because I am live streaming, what that means is if people type things in the comments, I might be able to react in real time as we go. So, hello to those who are watching right now. And I'm very glad you could join me live. And I have been bothered by a problem lately that I've been trying to figure out. Why is this thing happening? And I think a lot of people are watching this happen too, and they're probably wondering, why aren't other people seeing what I'm seeing? And I think I might have an answer to that. But I want to talk about the answer first, and then I'm going to come back to the conundrum. The answer goes like this. And I and this is there are several stories here packed into what I consider to be this answer. And I'm going to start with colors. I took a course on color theory a little while ago, and I don't. It did talk about color theory in terms of design for graphic design purposes, but the course started off by saying it is a unique and interesting prospect that we see colors that we know the names for. And as a general rule, if we don't know the names for them, we tend not to see them. Something that is a very interesting aspect of human literature is that there are certain colors that just show up right from the very beginning: white, black, and then over time, other colors we start to see mentioned in ancient writings referring to red and green and brown. And it took a long time before there was a word for blue. If you read the Iliad or Homer's Odyssey, the sea is referred to as gray. And for a long time, linguists were trying to figure out why this would be. Why wasn't there a color for blue? And psychologists may have stumbled upon the answer when they were studying some what we'd call primitive tribes, some in parts of the world that were not actively communicating with the rest of the civilized world. And I'm not casting aspersions on the advantages or disadvantages of how far developed a civilization is. But one of the things that they had found in studying these civilizations that were different from our own is that they had colors for shades of blue that we do not have. We don't have words for those colors, and the researchers could not see the difference between the different shades that the tribes people had for them. And likewise, there were a couple of shades that the tribes people weren't able to discern when presented with the labels, and usually those were colors of a more reddish variety that just didn't occur in nature as much where these tribes were located. And the class that I took was a very visual class, and they showed us here are three shades of blue, and they all looked exactly the same to me. However, they did demonstrate that there are other people who can see the difference, and those are people uh, who are who know the languages, who are fluent in the languages that have names for those shades of those colors. So this is one distinct point I want to make, that when it comes to colors, it would appear that our language shapes what we see. Now, Another interesting aspect uh, of how what we perceive can be suggested or highly suggestible. The Beatles were a rock and roll group from England whose music is known all over the world. And they have a song that they wrote about a girlfriend who was leaving for the town of Rye, which is a town that is on a major train route in the United Kingdom. However, when the song was being released, nobody in the United States really would know the town of Rye. And so when the albums were printed up, instead of calling the song Ticket to Rye, the song was called Ticket to Ride. And anybody who has heard that song, who has heard that the title is Ticket to Ride, hears that song as Ticket to Ride, even though if you know that it's actually Ticket to Rye, when you're listening to it, you can totally hear there's no D sound in that word, but they are absolutely saying Ticket to Rye. But because the album cover says it's Ticket to Ride, that's what we hear. And in fact, I saw this played out in even more interesting fashion where uh, back in the early days of the internet, when people were playing with different forms of animation, there was a product from Adobe called Flash that would allow you to do all kinds of animation, and then people were posting these on the internet. And there was this one group of folks. What they did was they they had an image of a chicken with Paul McCartney sitting on the chicken, strumming his guitar, and they were playing in the background the chorus from the song I just mentioned, but they were showing the words on the screen, chicken to ride. And Paul McCartney, you see this image of him sitting on this chicken, rocking back and forth, and he is singing, She's Got a Chicken to Ride. It really is the same song. And if you close your eyes, you can tell he's saying Ticket to Rye. But what you hear when you're watching it is chicken to ride. So I offer that as another piece of evidence. Very recently, and this is what actually kicks off this whole story and this whole trying to solve this conundrum. Very recently, there's a podcast that I've been listening to now for I don't know, 15, 20 years. I've been listening to it ever since it started. I think it's about 20 years ago, called Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And it's a podcast that focuses on the most recent news about science and also pseudoscience. So essentially, the competing claims that could be considered either scientific or absolute nonsense, but that people are peddling as if it is actually true. And they have a traveling show every once in a while. The people who do this podcast go from town to town, and they'll visit, and they have demonstrations that they will do. They also record a live edition of their podcast. Well, watching one of the demonstrations, it was absolutely fascinating. One of the guys who's part of the they call the Rogues Gallery, he had recorded an image of himself where his mouth was covered up, so you couldn't see what shapes his mouth was making. And then played an audio track where it sounded like there were maybe 3 tracks playing at the same time, but he's saying something that sounds like the same thing every time. And what I heard was him saying, Bob, 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 repeatedly. Well, then this was showing on a big screen. This is in a theater in downtown Seattle. Well, then they removed the image that was covering his mouth. And then he said, all right, what do you hear now? And while you were watching his face, while he was saying the words, watching his lips say the words, you could tell that that the way his lips were moving, he was mouthing fob, fob, fob. And sure enough, I'm like, oh, he's saying fob. Well, then the image changed and his lips were mouthing Bob, Bob, Bob. Oh, he's saying his brother's name, Bob. Then he showed the two video images next to each other up on this big screen so that you could look at either the left or the right. And in one of them, the lips are making the F. They look like they're making the F sound at the beginning of the word. And in the other image, the video, it looks like he is mouthing the letter B at the beginning of the word. And I absolutely, hands down, if I was looking to the left where I saw him mouthing the F sound, I heard him saying fob. And when I was looking to the right, where it looked like he was mouthing B at the beginning of the word, I swear absolutely what I was hearing changed to Bob. So quite literally, what I was hearing was affected by what I was seeing, just like that chicken to ride example. I printed up something because since I am new to the whole live streaming thing, I don't have a button to press to show you this this image in some sort of a nice PowerPoint presentation or whatever. You've probably seen this image before that I printed up, and it's an image of a rabbit. Look at that rabbit. It's looking to your right, and it's just kind of, it's a rabbit. Oh, and here's this other image. You've probably seen this one too. Of here we have an old woman. An old woman looking down and kind of dejected. The drawing is a little crude. Oh, I've got this other drawing here, and it's a duck, and the duck is looking to the left, and we can see this duck kind of looking to the left there. Oh, and here's this image of a young woman with her head turning away, like much more better drawn than that woman. Oh, wait a minute, that old woman. This is the second and the fourth image I showed you. It's the same piece of paper. This is the first and the third image I showed you. It's the same piece of paper. So maybe if I remind you that there's a rabbit looking to the right, you'll see the rabbit. Or if I tell you that it's a duck looking to the left, you'll see that it's a duck. The brain is wired to recognize patterns, but those patterns also are influenced by external factors. And I can shape how you perceive what you are seeing simply by saying something, by suggesting it. I could suggest it verbally the way I just did with these images, or I could suggest it by showing printed words across the screen. It's, I think, the key to why a lot of gaslighting tends to work. Gaslighting is a form of abuse, often in personal relationships where one person keeps repeating a message over and over and over again, insisting that a message is true, even though they know the message is not true, but they deliver it with such conviction that even though the other person initially is convinced that this message is not true, they start to come to believe it because the evidence starts to suggest that maybe they were wrong in what they first believed. Why do I bring this up? I've been observing lately. So I am recording this live stream in January of 2026 in the United States. And we have had some incidents happen recently, although I could be describing incidents that happened last year, the year before, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where we are watching, all of us are watching the same pieces of video and coming away with a completely different interpretation of what happened. I'm going to give you a benign example, or at least some might consider it benign, and that was there was a recent football game that was hotly contested between two very evenly matched teams in the American Football League, the NFL, National Football League, where one team in the overtime, where the entire game is going to be decided by who scores next. And one team, the Buffalo Bills, had thrown the ball, and it looked like the receiver, caught the ball just as he was falling down to the ground. And then after he had hit the ground, the defender from the Denver Broncos wrested the ball away. And so it looked like it was a catch, and then the receiver was down by contact, which meant the Buffalo Bills had successfully moved the ball down the field. However, other people saw the same thing and said, no, no, no. What happened was the defender for the Denver Broncos had, in fact, gotten control of the ball, and therefore it was an interception, which meant the Denver Broncos now had the ball instead of the Buffalo Bills. And there are people who are absolutely convinced it went one way, and there are other people who are absolutely convinced it went another way. This is a benign example, but there are less benign examples that are at play right now that are unfolding in the news. And I don't want to trigger anybody. And here's the thing. I don't bring this up by way of launching into a political conversation about what happened. I am not interested, for the purposes of this video, to discuss who is right. But what I do want to talk about is the fact that I know people personally in my life who have watched the same video evidence and are absolutely convinced that on the basis of some video evidence, there was a shooting that had taken place in Minnesota. And some people who saw this video evidence were absolutely convinced that what they saw was self-defense on the part of the person who had fired their gun. And other people who saw the exact same evidence who are just as absolutely convinced that it was not an act of self-defense. It was very, very clear that it was that the action was taken when the person was not in jeopardy. I'm describing this in vague terms. The issue is not what you believe about that video, if you have seen that video evidence. And there were multiple angles of the situation, just like there were multiple angles in that playoff football game. My point is, if you get all of your news from one particular source, you were primed to see it one way. And if you get all of your news from another particular source, you were primed to see it another way. And if you were somebody who does get your news from multiple sources, maybe you had a little bit less direct priming to tell you what to see, and you actually had to go further into your analysis in order to come to a conclusion as to what you think actually happened. I throw this out there because I see so many people who are getting so divided when they're looking at the same thing, but they are coming away with entirely different conceptions of what has happened. And I think it is very important that we appreciate the fact that sometimes the reason we're not seeing things the same way is because we are, in fact, being primed to see it one way or the other. It's possible we're being primed to see it by outside factors, like getting our news from a source that is interested in presenting information from a particular point of view, a particular political point of view, for example. It's also entirely possible that we've been primed by ourselves. Again, somebody who grew up in England is already familiar with the concept that there's a city named Rye, and somebody has a ticket to Rye. That means she is getting on the train and she is heading to the town of Rye. People in a country where there is no such well-known city as Rye will hear it as ride, especially if they've been primed to hear it that way, because this is their experience. Ticket to Ride doesn't make sense, but Ticket to Ride does. So the brain just sort of inserts that D sound. I do not bring this up as if this is some sort of a revelation that is somehow going to solve all of the divisions that we are seeing right now when different people are watching the same event and coming to different conclusions. But I bring it up as a challenge to you, my dear viewer, listener, to check your own assumptions, check what you have been potentially primed with, either by your own previous experience or by others making suggestions over and over and over again that what you are seeing is this instead of that. And if you're aware of that, then you might be able to put yourself into a situation to where you're able to see and or hear things that without all of that extraneous context that is actually leading you down the wrong path. For example, again, the Beatles song, the best way to really assess what it is they're saying is to close your eyes, forget what it looks like on the album cover, forget what you saw when you were watching a video of Paul McCartney riding a big chicken, and just try to listen to the words as they are being sung and see if you can hear it with the D, if you can hear it without. And if you're able to kind of hear it either way, depending upon how you're thinking about it, look into that story that I just told you and see if you're more convinced by the idea that there actually is a town called Rye that sits on a railway line, or if there isn't, and use that information to decide whether the story I just told you about Ticket to Rye is actually true or whether I made it up. This is your challenge for the day, and it is something that I think is very, very important. I bring it up because if we become too set in our beliefs and we only see what we believe, this can affect us with regard to politics, religion, morality, law, ethics, sexuality, gameplay. It can be traditions, how we interpret the importance of the norms that govern how we interact with each other. And if we can be primed, and if we can be primed by ourselves or we can be primed by other people, we have to be aware of it, because we could end up being manipulated and if we're on the lookout for it, maybe we are less likely to be manipulated. Cognitive biases actually help us to get through our lives um, with as little muss and fuss as possible. However, the cognitive biases that we have developed can also lead us astray. And if we have a more accurate picture of what reality is, I'm thinking we might sometimes choose differently than we would just on the basis of accepting what we are told as necessarily being true. So this is what I present today, and you know what? I very cleverly hidden the chat from my own view while I was talking, and yeah, and well, thank you very much uh, for participating. Let me see. I'm reading the comments right now. Um, so many. I'm gonna read this out loud. So many times when receiving information or news, Kevin types, his first instinct is to slow down, understand what's being told, and who's telling it, and then say, maybe. And I think that is absolutely the way to do it, especially when you are being presented with information that could be very, very important to the decisions that you will be making, whether it has to do with uh, uh, how you conduct yourself or the actions that you take in response to events that come up later. So I throw that out there, and I very much appreciate the thoughtful comments in the chat. Um, Thank you very much to everybody, and if you are watching this later, please give us your thoughts in the comment section below, and try to be respectful when you are engaging in conversation in the comment section. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for listening to what I have to say. And we'll see you again next week. Take care.